Hello and welcome to Unity Church on the Mountain, on the Road. The title of the talk today is going to be Divine Nature. But before we begin that, let's start by affirming our opening statement. There is only one presence and one power in my life and the universe, God. And remembering all the children in our life and the child that is within each of us, let us think of everyone in this universe with no exceptions and affirm together the children's blessing. We love you. We bless you. We behold the Christ in you. We accept you just the way you are. Walk in beauty. You are divine. And now, take a deep breath and move a little closer to that silent and still place within us. And let us affirm together our Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Leave us not in temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. So, divine nature. Divine nature. Nature is all around us. The divine is all around us. Divine nature and divine order. Nature being the natural flow of things, and order really being the same thing. I used to think that you could separate nature from something else, which would be man-made. And the more I've thought about it, the more, aren't we part of nature too? So really, is there anything other than what is nature? Just like, is there really anything other than what is the divine, what is one? In whom we live and move and have our being. So I've leaned very heavily in these past weeks on a theological approach to our practical Christianity. And today I want to take a small detour from that and show how these things that we teach are confirmed in other paths. Specifically today I want to talk about science. And specifically within science, I want to talk about that branch of physics that is quantum mechanics. So I have to start with a little bit of history of science to get some kind of background. If you'll remember Isaac Newton, he introduced a way of modeling the properties of light. Remember, he was famous for shining the light into the prism, and then on the other side was separated the bands of the rainbow. And he explained this phenomena by using a wave model for light. Because there had been an argument amongst the scientists of the day whether or not light was a particle or a wave. And indeed, there were good arguments for both. So another experiment that was done to show that light was a wave or had wave-like properties was called the two-slit experience. And so what we have is we have a sheet that would cover a large area, and in that sheet were two slits, just small slots relative to the size of light. So they're very tiny slots. And the idea being that if light was a wave, that it would shine upon this sheet of solid substance, and most of it would be blocked. But some of it would go through the slit, and some would go through the other slit. Now the other part of the experiment is behind the slits. So if the slits are here, then behind the slits, so the light's coming this way, there is a photographic paper that would pick up even the tiniest photon as changing the color of the paper. And so what they expected to see if light was a wave was an interference pattern. Because when a wave comes to a small slit like that, it begins propagating from a new center. You see, it starts from a center and shines out. Think of when a pebble hits the still surface of the water. The wave radiates out. So this wave is radiating out from the source until it comes to the filter screen that has the two slots. Most of the wave is stopped, and then from each slot we have essentially a new source. And the wave begins to radiate out in small circles, getting progressively larger and larger the further it gets from the slot. Now the same thing happens from the other slot. So you have two different circular patterns that begin to merge together, and they interfere with one another. See, a wave has troughs and peaks, and then troughs and peaks. And so if you have two waves coming together, sometimes they're going to meet where they each have a peak. And then you get double-sized peaks. And then when a peak meets a trough of the other wave, they cancel each other out and you have a zero. And then you have all of the different magnitudes of the wave in between. And what this looks like on the photographic paper is you have bands. You have a bright band followed by a dark band, and just continuing until the wave form has gone as far as it can go in that space. So we call that an interference pattern. Now, if light were BBs, if light were matter, and you can think of the matter as being small BBs, or really small tennis balls, but they'd have to be small enough to go through the slit. So we have these really small particles of light now. So we're thinking about light as being if light were a particle, what would it look like as it went through those same two slits? And so you can turn the slits on their side, okay? Make them a little bigger and just dump a bucket of sand on the top. And then what would it look like on the bottom? You would have two piles of sand one under each slit. And the highest part of each pile would be directly under the slit. So if light were a particle, just like the sand, then what we would expect to see on the photographic paper would be a very bright place behind each slit, and it would be getting darker and darker the further away that you got from the area of the photographic paper that was directly across from each slit. So what happened when they actually performed the experiment? The light went through both slits, interfered with each other, and we had the interference pattern. And so science said, well, we've got to have light as a wave. But here's where things started getting interesting. They said, well, what would happen if we observed to know which of the slits the light was going through? And what happened was really a shock. By just putting an observer at one of the slits, now we knew which of the slit the light went through. And when this was executed as part of an experiment, a surprising result came about. Instead of having this interference pattern that you would have from the wave, which is what we already saw, by only changing one thing, and that is observing which slit the light went through, now we have what we would expect to see as if wave were a particle. And we get one bright band under this slit and another bright band under this slit, and there is no interference pattern. So the scientists scratched their head. How can this be? The light is showing both properties of a wave and a particle. And what's different? There is an observer. They developed a model to explain this, that by the observation the waveform is collapsed. In fact, they also tried another variation of the experiment. They shot individual photons of light, one at a time, and so that it could only have gone through one of the slots. Now, they didn't have an observer, so they didn't have the collapse of the wave function. They didn't know which slot it went through. But what they found when they shot them individually, one at a time, they got the same interference pattern as if they just shot it with a band, just like turn the bulb on and just let it go. So the photon of light was interfering with itself. In other words, it was as if each particle had gone through both slots. So it was a wave at the time it went through the slots. But when it hit the screen, it collapsed into a particle. Similarly, when there was an observer at the slot, the wave of probability collapsed into a particle at the observation of it. And we saw that it came through the slots as particles. So how does that relate to us in practical Christianity? Notice there's this thing that changed the waveform both times, whether we were observing at the screen at the back or whether we were observing at the slot. The act of the observation is what determined the location of where that light would land on the screen. And who is the observer? Consciousness. Now remember how Charles Fillmore described this universe that we live in. He said that everything is either mind, meaning divine mind from source, ideas in mind, the Christ, and their expressions, Holy Spirit, the Comforter within us. Consciousness. You see, don't you see? It's all consciousness until it reaches the expression, and we are the expressing end of this. At the expressing end, the waveform, the probability wave collapses to a single point. And before it reaches us, all possibilities are there. And don't you see, we are each then the collapse of that huge idea, which is the Christ, and we are as that expressing in this world. We are the collapse of the waveform. Each one of us. I think it's very beautiful that science can bring us something like that. And what is the practical application of this? The first thing that I notice is that all of these solid things that are around me really aren't even solid. Okay, we have Einstein, who had the theory of relativity. The energy equals the mass times the speed of light squared. And what this shows us is that there is no such thing as matter. Even matter is really just energy that's packed together in a more dense occurrence. So there's energy that's out there in the air, and it's further away from each other. It vibrates faster. But then as it condenses, in the same way that water freezes from, it can be steam in the air, and then it condenses into water, liquid, and then water as solid, which is ice. And all that really has got to do with how much energy is in those molecules of water. So if we're thinking about the law of mind action, that thoughts in mind produce after their kind, or we're thinking about the golden key, stop thinking about the difficulty, no matter what it is, and think about God instead, what we're seeing is that our consciousness, which is really just information and energy, can have effect on the information and energy that's around us. And when we see that all of it is energy and not some solid particle, because you see, this is another thing about the two-slit experiment. After they did the experiment with light, they started to do it with atoms, small pieces of what we would think of as matter. And you know what? The matter also demonstrated wave-like properties. When they shot individual atoms through the two slits, you had an interference pattern on the back, and the behavior was exactly like what it was with the light. So when we sing, "We are light," truly, we are light. And truly, everything else in this universe is light. We can be aware of our thoughts through the day, or we can just choose to allow our brain, our consciousness, to go wherever it just bounces to based on what situation happens, and just follow whatever line of thought comes. Or we can remember who we are, the truth of who we are, and bring our mind to stillness, put our head and our heart in coherence, share that big love into the world, and affect everything around us. Not only the things that are close, when I fall asleep at night, I think of the things that I am grateful for, and I fall asleep in gratitude. Wake up in the morning. As soon as I realize I'm awake, begin to think of the things that I'm grateful for. I'm setting my intention for the day. Daily meditation. Now, meditation. There are lots of forms of meditation. There are so many forms of meditations as there are people to meditate. It doesn't have to be that stereotypical sit in the lotus posture in silence or chanting in the lotus posture. In fact, you don't have to sit at all. We each meditate in a different way. And there's different ways that we can each meditate throughout the day. I begin my day sitting on a chair with a cushion, straight back chair. And I sit in this, I begin with the 5 steps. I use the 5 steps of unity affirmative prayer. I begin by relaxing, and then an affirmation, and then the silence, and then the realization step, which may or may not actually occur. Just allow it. It comes from the silence, or maybe that day it doesn't. And then finish with gratitude. What it does is it sets my intention. Again, just like the gratitude in the morning and in the evening. And now throughout the day, I spend time in meditation while I'm working. No matter what the task is, there is opportunity to meditate. Each act becomes a prayer. Each act brings us closer and closer to Spirit. So, I'm going to ask you, maybe challenge you, to try this out. Because remember, it only works if you work it. So take some time this week at every hour, the chime of every hour, make that your goal. While you're in waking state, at the chime of every hour or half hour, try to do it each hour. Remember the truth of who you are and come to center. Allow your head and your heart to align and radiate big love out into this world. So the goal is at least once an hour. And if you don't make it, we're going to play with this idea so there is this forgiveness, or there's actually no reason to even forgive because we're doing this at the spirit of play. And this play will help us to grow spiritually. So, through the day, use any one of the tools in our spiritual toolbox. The silence is a wonderful one. An affirmation. You may need a denial to pull yourself out of whatever's going on in the mind, and then follow it with an affirmation. Or you can feel something pull you away and use the welcoming practice. So many different things. The Moses Code we talked briefly about also. But the point being to spend some time in each hour. It only has to be a few seconds each hour. Just remembering to do it is the exercise, really. The success or failure is not so important as the attempts. That we remember to do it. And then we do that again and again. All right. So I do want to share a song today. And this is a song that I wrote and it's based off of the art of spiritual peacemaking. We talk about the illumined mind, the awakened heart, and the realized soul. And that's what the song is about, because we really are all of these things. And yet we progress through them on a daily basis, going from one to the other. You are the awakened heart. I am that I am. You are the awakened heart. I am that I am. I am that I am that I am that I am. I am that I am that I am that I am. You are the illumined mind. I am that I am. You are the illumined mind. I am that I am. I am that I am that I am that I am. You are the awakened heart. I am that I am. You are the awakened heart. I am that I am. I am that I am that I am that I am. You are the realized soul. I am that I am. You are the realized soul. I am that I am. I am that I am that I am that I am. You are the awakened heart. I am that I am. Thank you. Let us take a moment to affirm together our prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us. I am the light. The love of God enfolds us. I am the love. The power of God protects us. I am the power. The presence of God watches over us. I am the presence. Wherever I am, God is, and all is well. Thank you so much.